CBSE Board, Class 11, History, Chapter 3, Part 3, Audio by Renee Matthew. The enemies of the Aztec Empire and what they did by coordinating with the Europeans was seen in the previous slide. We need to go into detail of how everything was looked upon and how several traditions changed over time. And that will be shown in the upcoming slides. We need to go into the briefing of the whole thing. There were a lot of changes and developments which took place in Europe in spite of all the devastation which was there. And the changes were found in agriculture and even in the lives of peasants, both in agriculture and lives of peasants. And because of that, there was a lot of cultural developments. Consequently and gradually, there was a lot of developments. This particular timeline draws our focus and attention to the contact which developed as a result of agriculture and trade between the continents. It's only because of commerce and trade that all these developments came about. The contact everywhere was not the same. There was a lot of variation in the contacts. But we can say one thing with assurance that ideas, inventions, goods, all these things were shared among the continents. People were interested in having a shared feeling and also a shared authority over the goods and inventions. Because of the progress, naturally and obviously there was warfare between kingdoms and people to have more power over others, to control land, resources, and also to access trade routes. Everybody did not have equal access to trade route. That is a very important point because it was dependent on the power and the control to have access on trade routes. So because of that, men and women were often displaced and enslaved to ensure that power and authority is there, dominion is there over others. Otherwise, they were exterminated. They were not allowed to communicate. Life was not very easy. So there are a lot of merits and demerits which took place in the olden days, and the life of people was really transformed completely. Beyond recognition, lot of changes were there. Life was completely transformed. Now we're going into the first part of this chapter, which is the three orders. So by this title itself, you know by now that it is the social segregation or division in the society. Of course, in your previous classes, you have seen how the society was divided into ranks based on their authority and everything. So that is what we are going to look into detail right now. The three orders, part 1. In this particular section, we will learn about the social, economic, and political changes that took place in Western Europe, especially between 9th and 16th century. And in one of the previous slides, I told you that maximum number of changes took place between the 9th and 17th centuries. So here, particularly, we will be dealing with the socio-economic and political changes. We know about the fall of the Roman Empire. West fell down. East was prolonging after that. Many groups of Germanic people from Eastern and Central Europe occupied regions of Italy, Spain, and France. We also saw that the Germanic tribes were very powerful in nature. They had the tribal origin, and it was very easy for them to annex and conquer places. We saw that, okay? So when there was not a political force which was unified, in the absence of a unifying political force, we need to understand, even when we saw the Mongol Empire, something which was different or which distinguished their power was the unifying political force. So you can imagine what will be the scenario when there is no unified political force. What will happen? Military conflict will be frequent. And there'll be fight and conflict to gather and occupy a lot of resources. And that was basically to protect one's land And that became very important just to gather resources and have dominion over it. So social organization, or you may ask, how was the social organization or demarcation done? The division in the society was done based on the control of land. So if there is a question, what led to the control of land, or what led to the difference in the control of land by people in the society, it is because of all these things. There was no unifying political force. Nobody was there to question or even ask why something is like that. Now, all these features were derived from the imperial nature of Roman traditions and German customs. So before all these things happened, Europe was under the imperial control of the Romans and the Germans. So they learned about power. They learned about unwanted authority. They learned about dominion, all these things from the Romans and the Germans. So that is what they also wanted to show. Power. With wealth, I will overcome. I will empower you. So that was the kind of idea which existed then, to have this three orders. And that is how the three orders came into being. Christianity, of course, was the official religion of Europe, especially of the Roman Empire from 4th century when they controlled Europe. And Christianity, after the collapse of Roman, don't think that it just evaded, that it just obliterated. No, it was still there. People were converted to Christianity. They started believing in it with a lot of ardor. It started spreading after the fall of Rome to Central and Northern Europe. Expansion was there. And as a result of which, the church also became a major landholder and political power in Europe. So when Christianity was encouraged, when it was expanding, church became the most important landholder and political force in Europe. And that is why we have the three orders. So all these points are important when they ask you about the three orders and how it came to be. All these points are very, very important. These are the most important part. Okay? How it came into being is very, very important. So have a good grip over it. All right? Now, the three orders, that is what this particular section is going to focus on. And the three social categories are Christian priests, land-owning nobles, peasants. These are the three main divisions. Don't think that there were no other divisions in between. These were the three main divisions: Christian priests, land-owning nobles, and peasants. There was a lot of changing relationship which took place between these three groups, and that eventually shaped the European century and history for several centuries. It was a result of the segregation of the society into these three orders which led to the writing of the European history. European history evolved under these three orders. That is what we have to understand. Now we are going to look at an overview, detailed overview of what it is all about. So in the past 100 years, European historians have done a lot of research and they went into the details of the history of regions, even of individual villages. Because to prepare a documentation of what really happened in these regions, it was very important to prepare a proper documentation, right? So for that, they had to study the histories of the region, especially of the individual villages. And this was possible because of the medieval period collection. They got a lot of documents, especially from the medieval period. This is not only a fact regarding the history of the world, but also in all other branches of study, literature, art, sociology, political science. So much of documents were received from the medieval period. Now, what were these documents? It was mainly details of land ownership, prices, and legal cases. So when you have an access to all these things, it is very easy for the historians to understand and study the details of these three things, right? So churches actually kept records of births, marriages, and deaths. From that, they were able to gather information of how things happened, to understand the structure of families, of population, how things were conducted, the social and the economic and all these changes which took place, how things were shaped, right? Even there were a lot of inscriptions in the churches, the way the churches were built, the way the churches were fashioned, that also gave an insight on how the order was happening or how the society functioned. The inscriptions in the churches gave information not only to society but also about the traders' association, because a lot of songs and stories evolved. It was formed and it was put up as inscriptions in church. And that gave a sense of cultural knowledge also. How? By giving a sense of festivals and community activities. So, songs and stories play a very important role where we are able to understand about the happening of a society. So that is what happened here also. Inscription in the churches gave a sense of festivals and community activities. All these factors were used by the historians to understand economic and social life. And that changed over a long period of time. It was like the increase in population. And within a very short period, because of the peasant revolts, what we have to see in the future in the upcoming slides is that peasants were not at all treated with justice. They had to face a lot of trouble, and the tolerant power of the peasants were very high. They tolerated so much. And when it went beyond a point, there were a lot of revolts. So we should understand that within a very short period of time, all these increase and changes took place. There were a lot of scholars which came about in France, and they worked on feudalism. One of the earliest scholars which came about in France and who studied feudalism was Bloch. B-L-O-C-H. This is Bloch. Marc Bloch, 1886 to 1944. He was one of a group of scholars. There were a group of scholars assigned to study about feudalism. He was one among them, who actually argued that history is not just history. It is an amalgam, or it constitutes much more than political history, more than international relations and the lives of great people. When you study history, there's a lot of things that one can gather, and that is why you're history students, right? It's not just the political history, it is not international relations, it is not just the lives of great people. We can infer a lot of things, we can deduce a lot of things from history. He also emphasized on the importance of geography, which shaped human history. Of course, human history changed because of the importance of geography. And he also told to understand the collective behavior or attitude of groups of people. It helped to understand the behavior and changes which took place to a group of people when you studied geography. When you study history, it is more of political, international, and lives of people. Even some of the personal lives were shown. Geography is collective behavior and attitude of groups of people. These two words are key words. Collective behavior. When you take off these two words, it does not give a proper answer. So collective behavior and groups of people, very important points. Now we have to look at Bloch Feudal Society. That was a work. It is actually about European people, particularly the French society between 900 and 1300, and that described about the social relations, the hierarchies which were prevalent in the social society, land management, and also the popular culture of this period. So this is the particular work of Bloch Feudal Society, which encompassed or which encapsulated hierarchy, land management, and popular culture. His career was cut short tragically. Something happened to him. His career. It was just cut short because the Nazis shot him to death in the Second World War. So he was having a very short life. But he gave much and contributed to the world of history. Okay? Now we have to go into the introduction to feudalism. These will have only the main points, but we have to understand what is feudalism. The term feudalism is used by historians basically to describe economic, legal, political, and social relationships that existed in Europe in the medieval era, not in France. something which existed in Europe, especially in the medieval era. All these are key words. Make sure that you remember it just like a definition. Medieval era, Europe, and all these things. Now we have to look a little bit into the word. It is derived from the German word feud. And feud means a piece of land. It refers to a society which developed in medieval France. Of course, it comes from the French social relationship and French society, and that was later developed and you can say imitated in England and southern Italy. It came from France definitely, but it was imitated later in England and southern Italy.